First of all, a very good morning and a warm welcome to our office and to this session. We are going to have a wonderful session. Before diving deep into the session, there are a few housekeeping items that let me cover them first. So first, very important, please keep your phone on silent mode. If you want to talk, please step outside the office, talk and come back again. But please keep, the discussions. Please also don't interact during the session. Second, very important part, right, is ensure that you are, sharing your insights, on the group as well. Many people, right, as you could see, there was a huge response. But many of the participants, they are not based in Pune, so they were not able to join. So please share a few key lines that you could come across, right, key lines or key takeaways from the session. Please share them on the group so that it will be a good inspiration, information for other panelists as well as for us as well. So we will also get to know. Third very important part is, also use this as a networking opportunity. So I saw that some of you, may not be comfortable talking to everyone, but please be open and, have a very good networking session as well. I could see a lot of interesting founders are also here. So ensure that you get maximum out of this session. So last session that we had, some of people, right, who uploaded their photos and they shared, right, on LinkedIn. Some of them got even 8,000 likes as well. So there is, right, a huge networking, right, that you could actually leverage through such events. So ensure that you're open and you're also, right, feel free to take as many photographs as you want and tag, right, whoever, right, you meet. It will be a really good for everyone. One more point, I really would like to thank Amol. He's the originator. He's the one, right, who came up with this idea. And, he also, right, got wonderful panelists. So thank you, Amol. Let's give, right, him also a big round of applause. What we are going to do, right, in this session is, this is going to be a foundation. Right, we will cover the introductory part of generative AI. As you would know, right, it's very exhaustive. So we'll not go into a lot of details, but we'll cover it from the point of view of business, and it will be, right, more of an introduction. But what we have seen that since there is, right, a huge, huge traction, right, for this event, we are thinking of having follow-up sessions as well. So please keep, be active, right, on the group, because as you know, right, generative AI or these latest, right, AI technologies are going to touch almost, right, all the businesses. And you have to see, right, which area that you should pick and how you should efficiently use that in your system is going to be very important. So ensure that, right, you are also leveraging that part. So what we are going to cover, we will start with understanding of generative AI. Then we will discuss applications in businesses, how they use it, personalization and user experience, followed by automation of creativity. Then we will also talk about enterprise challenges around implementation. We'll cover the ethical considerations that we have, infrastructure and implementation, future of generative AI, and we'll also cover, right, what things that you need to look at while you're raising investments. So there are a couple of points that we'll touch upon. Again, we have worked, right, we have spent some good amount of time to ensure that looking at the audience, right, what type of questions and what type of things that we should cover. So I really hope that this becomes, right, a very productive session, and would like to ensure that this gives the highest ROI, right, especially, right, after joining such events, you should get, right, the highest ROI through this event. So let's basically dive in. I would like to start this session, by, if you could introduce yourself and share, right,
My background has been in technology and engineering for the last 21 years. I was in IBM for 12 years prior to this, working as chief architect. I worked across digital integration, infrastructure, analytics, various areas, but the last few years has been in the analytics and AI space. In the last couple of years, I moved on to co-found a company with a classmate of mine who I've known for 25 years. We have built a generative AI product. It's out there live and later on I'll be happy to share more details about the product. But it's a platform that essentially is for HR teams, for talent acquisition teams, to help them use generative AI capabilities throughout the talent life cycle. So whether it is talent marketing, which is a big use case for us, where companies need to showcase what they do, how they do it, they need to keep engaging with talent. There's a lot of manual effort that goes in. They hire agencies, there's high cost. They're competing with large companies like Google, etc. So we are giving them tools to generate content, verify content, rank candidates very quickly using AI and so on, right? So that's a platform we built. I'm the co-founder and CTO for that product. And like I said, today I'm here to learn from everyone and co-panelists.
Hi, I am Amol Donse. I've been, both of these are friends, so Anand and me, we know each other from 12 to 13 years. So currently in IBM, I am playing the role of CTO for Strategic Partnership Lab and working on generative AI stuff. So you might have heard about Watson X. We have 3 flavors of it: WatsonX.ai, which is the generative platform; WatsonX.data, which is from a lakehouse perspective, that's another platform; and third is around WatsonX.gov, which is going to be released in November. Again, there is a dedicated squad that is established for the generative AI stuff. I'm part of that and working closely with the strategic partners like AWS, Azure, SAP, Samsung, Cisco, and leading the entire technical stack of it. Prior to this, I was part of lab service. So I have around 55 patents, and a lot of them are with Anand as well when we were together. Part of the patent review board from IBM standpoint. Outside of IBM, I am part of a couple of board of studies, MIT, ADT, MIT WPU, Cummins, SICR. Also on the advisory board of a couple of engineering colleges in Maharashtra. I am the chair for the Future Skill program, which is run by Government of India. The whole intention of the program is how we can help the class 1 and class 2 officers in the government jobs to adopt AI. So working closely with CDAC to establish this particular program. I'm here to learn from all of you, and we would like, it would be good if we can contribute and have like a collaborative session where it is like maybe more or less each of us learn from both the parties. Looking forward, and thank you Anand Sagar for giving the opportunity.
So I think these two gentlemen just made my life much tougher. I think I certainly don't have any patents at this point in time, but I have a lot of patience to go with. Yeah, so that probably will reflect in the kind of experience I have. I have more on close to 2.5 years, 2.5 decades of experience in the IT sector. Starting as a developer in Java, web technologies, done a lot of integration, done roles as an architect, technical lead, various global projects as a part of the IT services organizations, exposed to different geographies and different domains or industries, I would say. But what has been common for me has been the KIDA, or the spirit for technology, because things have evolved, have continued to evolve as we speak, right? One can argue somebody who started his career 25 years ago may not be adept or may not be aware. That's normally the case, but I think that spirit kept me alive. So I think I worked with a lot of large organizations, the global organizations, Accenture, Wipro, Symantec, that's where, Veritas Symantec, that's where I and Namal worked together. And also had a 2-year entrepreneurial stint when I got bored with the large account management, which just happens to be only managing Excels and PPTs, not really adding value to yourself and the company or the customer, right? And that's when I started. I had a stint of 2 years and a half as a self-funded or as a bootstrapped startup. That probably gave a much different vibe to the whole approach to life and organization and the society in general, right? And then right now I'm working with a German branded company, Wurth IT, which is a part of the Wurth group. Some of you may or may not have heard. It's a well-known brand in Germany, in Europe. And I think this is a company established in 2015. I worked in different progressive roles as a part of the formation. And now we are a 170 member team and working in some niche areas, largely inward focus to serve the group. But I think in the process, however, we also have served a lot of Indian customers in the financial domain, insurance in particular, manufacturing and everywhere else. I think customer management and staying in, understanding how enterprises deal with, evaluate, adopt anything that comes up new has been my forte, and that's what I love doing together with the customers and our own internal stakeholders. So I think when Amol asked me, would you be wanting to join this forum, I think my first reaction was, will I be really an odd man out there? Because you guys definitely are heavily into technology, but I think getting a perspective of how industry perceives technology, anything that comes onto the anvil, and how they think and approach something new, which is everyday affair today, right, is something which I probably may try and add and complement them. And like you said, I'm also looking forward to interacting, learning, understanding a little more about this technology. Not just that, but where we are moving as a team and as a ecosystem. Yeah. Thanks again, Anand.
Thank you, thank you. This is really exciting. I mean, 55 patents. You know, just to give you an idea, I mean, we recently filed, we got right like one, and we recently filed 2 patents, and we are so happy, right? Like that. Okay, we are doing something innovative, but 55 patents. I mean, it's really amazing. So, I mean, we'll keep that in mind, right? Like when we are now talking to our clients, and you know, like why we have started this, right? Like let's basically understand why we have started these networking sessions. One is a very important part, right? Like being in Pune, we don't have enough access, right? Like to a lot of interesting, you know, different people, right? Like, I mean, so I really wanted to ensure that we create that as a platform, and this will only happen, right? Like if we all start contributing, because this is not for, right, like only single person. This is for everyone. And second part, right, like what I've seen that, I mean, people like, you know, Amol, Anand, and I mean, Ravi, I mean, it's very difficult to get your access to your talent or access to your experience as well. So with such forums, such networking session, we really want to create that access to the knowledge, like which will democratize, right, like and help us as well, right, like in our business. So let us start, right, like let's dive into the questions. The first question that I have for Amol. So what is generative AI, and you know how it is different? I mean, let's go right like with the basic foundation. But before asking that question, I would like to ask, right, like how many of you here know generative AI? And what I mean by know, I mean I'll you know whoever raised the hand, I will ask him to talk. So so how many of you, right, like know, right, like generative or have used it? I mean, again, I won't ask, so please raise your hand. So. Have you come across generative AI before, or have you, right, like I mean, started doing? How many of you use chat GPT? Excellent. Okay, so we are, right, like we are seeing, right, like I mean, it's already been used. So tell us, right, like from the perspective, what is generative AI, you know, and how it is different from traditional AI? If you could share.
Sure, yeah, I think that's a good question. So getting into generative AI, let's try to understand what does traditional AI looks like. So if we look at the AI cycle or the machine learning cycle, so to say, we started with typical non-logical expert systems, which were like not machine learning based. From there, we started our journey towards machine learning, where it was like more or less prediction, or it was like maybe getting into segmentation, customer segmentation. So it was machine learning. From there, we moved to deep learning. So deep learning was around like maybe if I give machine like maybe pictures of cats and dogs, which is a common example, and then probably I give a different photo to the machine, it was able to identify that if this is a cat versus if this is a dog. This was deep learning at a very high level. Then from there, we are moving to the foundation model or the generative AI. So how it is different? So when I was talking about deep learning or any machine learning, I have to use label data. So I am labeling my photo of cat as cat and photo of dog as dog in order to train that particular machine, intercept that, then probably give me that particular answer. Now in the case of foundation model or generative AI, you don't need to give any kind of an label data, and that's the huge differentiator. You don't need to have multiple models created, so it is very generic in nature. The other difference is it is more or less generative. So there are 5 typical use cases that we are coming across, and these are 5 points from generative AI perspective. One is contextual search, summarization. Third is question and answers. Fourth is entity extraction, and the fifth is around like maybe how I can use the context of the user in order to answer the question. So these are the 5 areas, and we can segment this like maybe we can apply this in any industry, and that's where the generative AI becomes completely different. I don't need to create my own model. I can use the model, existing model. For example, you guys might be hearing a lot of models now. ChatGPT is the famous one. So ChatGPT 3.5, which has been trained on 70 billion, right? 70 billion parameters. So what is like maybe 70 billion parameters? So 70 billion, like maybe we say 70 billion tokens. So assume it like maybe from a layman's perspective, 70 billion words. It's not like maybe an apple to apple comparison, but it has been trained on that amount of data. So I don't need to worry about a huge data set. That was one of the challenge. Now it comes up with its own challenges as well. So we'll talk about that. But the start of this happened like, this was initiated in 2018. It was called as BERT, which was around 110 million tokens. And in 2021, so it's not like maybe the research is not being done very fast. So we have just in 2021, Stanford coined this term as large language models. They were calling it large dataset models at that point of time. And then eventually they started calling it large language models. The complete difference that they were able to establish is I don't need to label data. So huge data were provided, and then we come up with ChatGPT 1, 2. Now today if you see, one of the established open source repository for the generative AI models, or what we call it as large language model or foundation model, is Hugging Face. So you would be able to find all kind of models over there. Now you would be wondering, oh, there are hundreds of models. So what is the differentiation that comes on this particular model? So it has been trained on data. So there are 3 types of, at a very high level, 3 types of LLM model: encoder, decoder, and encoder and decoder model. And each it is having like maybe its own, I would say, its own importance. It is used for a specific use case. Let's not get into the details of that. We will cover that in like, as Anand was saying, in subsequent session.
Right. So no, I mean, I didn't make it clear that introduction for us, not for you, right? Like, so this is not going to be, so introduction for you perhaps, right? Like going in the models and encoder and decoder. But thanks very much. I mean, this is, right, like, I mean, gave, right, like a good idea about, right, like what we are using, especially in ChatGPT. But would like to understand more from the business perspective. So Anand, if you could share, the business use case and how you are using it and what type of things that you are seeing, right? Like potential that you are seeing. I mean, if you could share that, that will be very helpful.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll take up from where Amol left. So for businesses, what we see with generative AI is like what happened with cloud, right? You, like Amol said, you don't have to build your own data, build your own models. Similar to what happened with everything becoming a service, right? You don't need to purchase your own machines. There is a Amazon or Google or who has the compute, in terms of millions of, compute power, who are training the models on data which is publicly available data. So this was the generation that started with BERT, like Amol said, with pre-trained models. And what businesses need to do is only identify their use cases to fine-tune the model, right? So you don't need the underlying infrastructure. The AI infrastructure in a way is already there. Models have already been pre-trained by the Googles and Facebooks of the world. What you're doing is you take your own limited domain-specific data sets or company-specific enterprise data, and you use the AI to give you the results based on your context, your data. right? So that's what we are doing for HR. Like I said, we use the company's enterprise's data, their context, their workflows, where they are, say, in the talent life cycle, in the recruitment life cycle, who their audience is, which candidates they are engaging with, who they are as a brand, what do they stand for, what is their brand voice, and we use the underlying infrastructure, AI infrastructure, which is the LLMs, to give them contextual content. Contextual content could be personalized communications, like if I'm engaging with 50 candidates who applied to a job. One is, how do I know who I should prioritize? So AI again comes into picture there to extract. So the extraction capability that Amol referred to, one of the 5 capabilities, AI has gotten good enough that I can even take like a unstructured resume, say in a PDF, completely extract all the specific details like the skills, roles they have played, certifications, all of that. I can summarize it for my recruiter. I can use it for comparing, for doing searches, which is the other use case. I can use it for constructing my own content based on my data. So for example, if I'm looking for certain features in the job, I can match it with those features in a way where it can have a much broader understanding. So a system developer and a programmer, today a generative AI model understands that these are very closely related versus a system developer and a salesperson, right? So that is how we are leveraging it to create communications, content, to do candidate ranking, etc., which are a very specific use case where today recruiters spend a lot of time. So we are offloading that by using this AI toolkit to handle this for users on behalf of users and cutting down the time, increasing the speed of recruitment.
Excellent. So, just follow-up question to Ravi. If you could share, right, like insights on the business and perhaps, right, like taking one industry such as e-commerce to understand, right, like how we can use and leverage it in the business, if you could share.
Sure. I think just taking the cue from what Anand just mentioned, every day in and out. And I think that's one area where generative AI is getting leveraged very heavily because that's one domain where content is the king, right? Because we all get influenced, attracted, and kind of swayed with all the content, all the promotions that we come across on the mobiles and applications day in and day out. I think all that creativity or creation of, churning out new content, contextual content based on personal interests, browsing patterns, and all that is now getting done by the machines. Yes, it was already being done earlier, but I think it's getting much more deeper and pervasive now. And most importantly, what people are trying to leverage generative AI to some extent is not just content, which is, when I say content, it can be in the form of text, images, videos, and everything else. And I think people are creating product designs or the look and feel of stuff, images, purely using technology. I think it's kind of killing the creativity or rather compromising the creativity to an extent, one may argue. But the kind of jumpstart one gets rather than trying to go through the process manually, trying to have multiple iterations is significant, right? You may have 5, 6 options and then you can still apply your head and try to narrow down the best of 2, right? I think this kind of benefit that we see, I think is phenomenal, and it is being used across, and the large platforms which kind of provide this e-commerce as a service and even the technology platforms, the OEMs, are embedding this as a part of the platforms. For example, Amazon is extensively using it because they are the largest marketplace on earth. And they have also the benefit of having AWS, a homegrown infrastructure where nobody has to worry about the data privacy or the customer's information going beyond their realm, right? So they are definitely in a pivotal situation. And Shopify, those who heard about Shopify, which is targeted at small and medium enterprises to get their online shops ready. They have tools embedded in their toolkit now, which enable you to leverage generative AI skills, technology, to create content, promotions and stuff, on the fly with very limited effort and with a reasonably good impact. Yeah, I think this is definitely just growing. I just can't imagine how much is happening already. And yes, but the advantages remain. I think one may argue, I think maybe the creativity part of it, but I think there is an advantage because the turnaround time and the options you have in the iterative process are much wider and bigger.
So again, right, like one quick question on this is, what are the common misconceptions, right? Like, I mean, when we are actually, I mean, there are so many applications in so many different, domains. So, like from overall, right, like not from technology perspective, but I mean, if you could share, right, like any business or any business use case, what are the misconceptions, right, like that are there, right, like in perhaps Amol, if you want to share, right?
Yeah, so one thing to remember is this is like when you say generative, the name itself says that I am generating something, and the misconception is one of the biggest misconception that is coming across the entire IT industry, that is traditional AI going to exist or not, right? So typical use cases that we are seeing at this point of time, there are 7 or 8 that at least I am working on at this point of time. So we have got around 20 customers where we identified what they are looking for. 3 or 4 areas that we are seeing. So one is how we can optimize or automate my IT processes. That's like maybe around 60-70% of the inquiries are coming in that particular area. The second use case that I am seeing is around customer care, and it's like a no-brainer that customer care is going to be the, I would say, the next best use case. A third is talent HR. That's another use case around. So this was like maybe based on some of the analysis that we have done in IBM and some consultants companies have done for us. The third is talent. The fourth one was around supply chain. So in the supply chain, how we can use generative AI. Fifth one was, I believe was if I'm not wrong, around finance as well. But it was having a lower priority. The reason is the privacy of data, the security of data comes into picture when it comes to finance. And that's why it has went like maybe from a priority perspective at the bottom. The first, I would say like till first half of 2024, there are 3 use cases that we are going to address in the industry. One is definitely IT processes, like maybe code creation, code generation, and how I can optimize my entire IT process. Second, I'm just trying to reiterate 3 things. One is IT processes, second is the customer care industry, and third is the talent industry. Talent industry is going to need this, like for example, as Anand was mentioning, that the resume that a candidate wants to send to a recruiter, and then probably an HR is trying to process that. How generative AI is going to help? It is going to help the candidate in order to create the resume. It is able to help the HR firm in order to identify what they are looking for and take a decision in a very rapid way, and at the same point of time it is going to benefit the organization for which the recruitment is happening. So talent HR is one of the big area that everyone is eyeing upon. E-com, again, as Ravi mentioned, that's another area. Again, e-com with customer care or customer service is the one. So e-com needs supply chain, inventory management as well. So all these things are, I would say, correlated, and Gen AI is going to solve this particular problem. Now to Anand's question, that what is the misconception? The misconception that I see is around prediction. Is Gen AI going to do a prediction for you? No, it is not. So traditional AI is still going to be there. Gen AI is going to work along that traditional AI in order to address lot of areas that were still vacuum.
Excellent, excellent. No, I didn't want to stop, right? Like I just wanted to listen to what you are saying. So it was really good. So Ravi and Anand, you both mentioned that like data and personalization, right? Like is going to play a critical role, and specifically focusing on specific domains, right? Like I mean, is going to right, like will be very important. So can you share, right, like some insights on personalization, right, like in this space? maybe Anand and then.
Sure, thanks. So, I'll kind of extend from the initial analogy of the cloud, right? The cloud era. What we see is generative AI is also, in a way, will democratize the use of AI, the use of content creation, with the availability of these large language models, make it a more level playing field. And the reason I say that is today, if you have if you're a large company, you have the money power, you can hire people, agencies to create content, to be creative, to communicate, and all of that. And even though small companies also are vying for the same talent, so I'm talking about now the talent acquisition use case. But today, large companies have the muscle power or the advantage because they can actually reach out to a much larger audience. You can see IBM's ads on every single site, right? Whether it's NDTV or any this thing. They're able to do much more work, create much more content, and also have the advertising power. With generative AI, what it does is, especially in terms of the personalized engagement and creativity, now even smaller companies have the tools with large language models, foundation models essentially, you can say, because there's language and there's images as well, to, like I say, create personalized content based on their brand, their data, their target audience. So, in the resume case, if I know just by looking at, even if I have 50 resumes, if I know what are the key things that stand out for each of these people, I have saved the time to go through the entire resume. Then I can use those top things for each person to write a very personalized email, for example, using generative AI, that, hey Amol, I really liked your work on, say, the government initiatives that you're doing and your patents in a specific area, right? Generative AI can actually extract the most relevant details and create the communication without you having to actually read through the entire resume, because if I have to read Amol's resume anyways, it'll take a lot of time, right? So that is the power, and that is where this is now available even to smaller companies, anyone really. And today you see so many developers, startups, that is why starting to use this to enable these features for their businesses, for their products.
I think personalization is a ongoing and an existing thing as far as e-commerce space is concerned. I think we all are fully aware, privy to, and also irritated with sometimes, and too much of bombarding happening. What is happening now is, I think there is little more method to madness in terms of personalization, because people are getting a little deeper. I think the insights are much more valid, and the content that is generated is very pointed, right? Because the more interactions on internet is allowing them to have more data, more insights about us. And now I think if you look at it, just one misconception I would like to add what Anand asked is, one may argue there is one single model which solves all our problems, even in content generation. That is not true. That's typically what people think. I have this model and I'm done with that for life. That's not true. Because there is a model which is meant for summarization. There is one for learning, one for creating something. One is something which takes care of bifurcation and filtering, right? I think we shouldn't misconstrue model as a concept for what it is meant for, right? Because everything has a purpose. So I think in terms of personalization also, people are using it very selectively for a specific use case, and it also varies in a B2C to B2B scenario. Very, very different, because there's different paradigms altogether, right? Because here the connection is at an enterprise level and one is at an individual level. I think these are very different nuances which people are leveraging very well, and this is only going to get bigger and better, right? I think now people are moving away from online shop mode to marketplace. Everybody is a marketplace, call it Nika, and everybody is a marketplace. I think the online shop is probably a myth that probably we went through and went over. That hype is over. So when you have marketplace, you're talking about multiple suppliers as well as different set of buyers, which could be enterprise as well as individuals. So I think you can imagine the amount of content generation which has to still remain stay in context, and taking into account the customer's history, the background and what they are looking for have been working and buying over the course of years. So I think, so in that standpoint, from that standpoint, I think Gen AI is going to be super beneficial, and people have already started putting efforts towards it.
Can you share, right, like how can we use, traditional model along with, if you could share a few use cases, that will be very helpful.
Sure. So let's think about like maybe if we want to put traditional versus Gen AI in a layman's language. So let's say I have a chef, a traditional chef, versus I have a creative chef. Now, what traditional chef typically will do? Traditional chef will create like maybe recipes like maybe pasta, maybe biryani. Now, what creative chef will do? Creative chef will understand what this particular chef is doing. So, like maybe taking that, okay, how pasta is done, how biryani is done, and try to use that in order to build something which is creative, which is called past biryani. So, which is completely different. So, it is like generating something. Now, let's try to put the analogy to econ that Ravi was mentioning. In the case of traditional AI, like let's say I am launching a new product in the market. So what I will do with traditional AI, I will try to understand the demographic, I will try to understand the segmentation, and I will try to understand that what is my customer base for that particular product. So I can do this with my traditional AI. Getting segmentation, use basis of my demography, I will understand that how many customers are willing to buy this particular product. So this can be achieved with traditional AI. Now let's come to the Gen AI. So Gen AI or LLM, all foundational model, what it will do is, let's say I have identified 10,000 customers who are probable customers for my product. So what used to happen before Gen AI, I will create segmentation and I will say, okay, people living in Deccan area, this is a set of audience, and I will create some kind of an content for them. People living in Kothurud area, I will, like, based on demographic, based on age, I will create some content for that particular audience. But what is happening with Gen AI, for all these 10,000 users who are willing to buy my product, I am creating a customized content for each and every one without spending the amount of energy, money and effort on that particular stuff. So everyone, so like let's say Ravi will get a completely different set of marketing content than what I am going to get based on my interest. Anand may get a completely different set of content. So this is like a simplistic use case, I would say, from a combination of traditional and Gen AI. There are more use cases, but again, those get into like maybe a complexity of implementation. I am working on at least 4 or 5 use cases at this point of time, where we are trying to combine the traditional AI and Gen AI.
Excellent. This is really great. And now again, connecting this with creativity, and you mentioned, right, like traditional shape versus creative shape.
Right.
So how creativity, right, like would impact in this area, and perhaps Anand, I would like to ask you how to automate creativity. I mean, this is, and again, right, like creative, we always tell that, like, look, AI is not going to impact creativity, but I'm sure, right, like it will enhance. So if you could share, right, like some instances and help us understand that part.
Yeah, I think where we see this is, of course, the past biryani might be attractive to some people, some might say "Arey, ye kya hai" kind of thing, but where we see this going is companies are also starting with simpler use cases. So for example, we are also working with ad agencies. Now let's say I'm a small company, I need to create ads, and every ad has to be new, fresh, unique and so on, right? Now what I could do is, based on the context, I can look at, even if I have a set of stock images, text, etc. What AI lets me do today is look for the most suitable, most relevant images, take that, potentially make some minor changes based on my context. Like if it's a job ad, which is again a use case that we deal in, every time if I have to create a new ad with a new picture, with new content, etc., it is a lot of work, and or companies hire agencies. What AI lets me do is I can look up a similar job ad, say for a similar role, from my previous history, and because AI, has from a computing power, there's no limitation. I can look up all the kinds of images that are most relevant, because AI also now, I mean, with the toolkit, when we say AI, the toolkit, which involves things like doing similarity searches, extraction, etc. I can look for the most relevant content. It could be images, it could be text, and reconstruct the most relevant content for my immediate requirement, which can be a totally new job ad, which is now fresh because I've taken something that is most relevant from something similar that has happened before, but I've given it a new spin, a new twist, and created a totally new ad, right? And which is how humans also work, right? I mean, we don't create things from scratch. We look for, based on our previous experience, whether it's a chef or a recruiter or anyone, and we modify it for the current context, right? So that is where we see AI is bringing in that human creativity in to build on what is already there, but also give it a freshness every time, bring in new flavors, combining multiple things which are contextual and brand specific.
Excellent, excellent. No, this is really good. So follow-up question on that is, how AI, right? Like, I mean, generative AI is addressing the pain points that traditional AI was not able to address. I mean, are there any insights? I mean, any one of you could, yeah.
Yeah, so typical pain points that traditional AI was having is like, I want to build like maybe new model, okay. I want to have a training data for that particular new model, and then there is again going to be a effort, there is a resource that is required. Now what is happening with the foundation model? I have base that is ready. I don't need to create the base. So again, like maybe we have to take it with a pinch of salt. Everyone is saying that okay, there is going to be a huge job cuts in the market. I think that's not true, but yes, some jobs are going to get, I would say, not irrelevant, but they may have to reskill or upskill themselves in order to be in the market. So again, coming to the question, what pain points that Gen AI is addressing? One is I don't need to have my own model. So there is a base model that is already there, and there are n number of models. So based on the need, so there is a misconception as well that bigger the model, it is more accurate. I think that's a huge, big misconception. We were using like maybe a huge model, which is called as Plan 5T, with 20 billion parameters. And what happened with that is, we were trying to like maybe address one use case. Let's not get into the detail of the use case, but we were trying to address use case. It was not giving us right answer. So there is something called as prompt engineering. So I have to tell that model that what I am looking for, and it will give me answer based on that particular prompt. Now we tried multiple permutation and combination trial and errors in order to address that. So it was not able to give us what we were looking for. Then we used another model which is called as Slate, which is trained on just 110 million parameters or tokens, and we were able to get more accurate answer. So again, the benefit is I don't need to have a huge model and huge resources, huge infrastructure. In order to build my model, I can take one model that is available. So the n number of models are available. I don't need to build from scratch. That is, I would say, a most important thing that has happened, where a huge amount of time was spent to understand the use case, which model to build. So the build time is reduced as well. So these are some of the things. Again, there are more things as we are discovering more and more. Every day we are learning that okay, this is what it can do, this is what it cannot do as well. So I think we may have to understand that things are ready for you. You have to just build on top of that based on your use case. And there is like maybe a notion that are all this particular model based on some industry. So there are organizations or there are companies like what Anand is trying to do. They are trying to build models specific to a use case, but those kind of models are not available. When we say large language model, they are all generic models. They are trained on specific set of data. Now everyone will have a different functionality, as Ravi was mentioning, like maybe some models, for example, we call it like an encoder model, which are good from a contextual search and classification. Decoder model, which are, we call it like an output only model, which are good from a translation perspective. And then there is an encoder decoder model, which is able to do all these particular tasks, like what encoder and decoder is going to do, the 5 capabilities that I was talking about, but each will have its pros and cons. So base is ready. Now you have to just like maybe put an icing on the cake, but it's not as easy as I am saying. We may have to put a lot of effort and energy, and there are different techniques in order to address that. And I would say data scientist job would be converted into prompt engineer, what we call in our world prompt engineer and prompt tuning jobs. So the data scientists who were creating the model, now they may have to understand how to play with the model in order to get the output that you are looking for.
So again, prompt engineer, like what would be the difference? Prompt engineer and prompt scientist, right?
So yeah, so prompt engineer, so there are 3 or 4 things in the typical Gen AI from a technical perspective. So one is prompt engineering, second is prompt tuning, third is fine tuning, and fourth is what we call is as RAG.
Okay.
Retrieve augmentation generation.
Okay.
So these are typical technical implementation. The simplest way is prompt engineering. So for example, I am telling a model that I want to know like the capital of India. So it will tell you capital of India is Delhi. But what I want now is I want to know that what is like maybe what are the good qualities or what are things that are in Delhi. So I will prompt the model that okay, I want the answer in this particular line. Now I will ask similar question, what is the capital of Great Britain? So what it will say is, it won't say London, it will give me a descriptive answer.
Okay.
So that is what, in simplest way, this is what prompt engineering is. Very simple way.
No, it's about interacting with the AI, right? That's how you interact with the AI. So just following up on that part, I mean, please ensure that, right, like I mean, after the session, you will get a prompt engineering, work where you can ask questions. So the more, right, like I mean, good questions that you ask, right, like I think what we can do is, whoever asks, right, like really good question, we'll give them some gift, so that like it will also incentivize. But one quick question, and before, right, like sharing that, I mean, if you really like this, please share, right, like few lines on the group, because that will also, right, like help others to stay active in the group in the future as well. So on our WhatsApp group, if you could just put like few lines about this session, how it's going, it will be really good, right? Like I mean, others will also look forward to. Now you mentioned that, right? Like one model that you created, like had 20 billion, right? Like records, and other which was right, like which had 110 million records was more effective. What was the reason? Was the data points, like, was it domain specific? I mean, what was the reason?
It was not domain specific, it was trained on specific data. What kind of an data that it has been trained on,
Right.
and what is the logic that particular model is built upon. So again, like you have to understand what is the use case that you are trying to address. Typically what is happening is, at least in the SaaS world, everyone is using the OpenAI because it is trained on a huge number of parameters and it is pretty mature.
Right.
Let's be honest, it is pretty mature. So we have GPT 3.5, GPT 4, the OpenAI models, which has been using the huge amount of data. Now we have a model from Google called as Bard. I won't say it is accurate, but it is able to provide us with more information. Now it might be, and I think we will talk about that as well, like is it hallucination, is it like opacity in the information? Let's not worry about that. But based on what I am trying to play around with those models, what I am seeing is Bard is giving you results because it is being trained on the very updated data, versus OpenAI or your ChatGPT, which everyone is using. it is still not open to internet, so it is giving you a data which is till 2021. The accuracy, I would say, is more from a chat GPT perspective compared to a BARD. But again, as I said, this is like a question and answers that we are trying to understand. Like when you are trying to play with BARD or chat GPT, that is just one use case, which is the use case of Q&A.
Right.
So when I am going to use that particular model, what is my use case? So my use case was entity extraction, okay, and context generation. That was my use case. So the model that I was using was not giving me the better result for that particular use case. So you have to understand what is the use case as well.
Got it. So first of all, we have to focus on use case, and yeah, this is really a great answer. So Ravi, the next question, can you share, right, like, what are the enterprise, challenges around implementation of GenAI? If you could.
The simple answer, many. Yeah. I mean, I think sky's the limit. And the biggest challenge all the enterprises have, and bigger the better, in a different way. Yeah, because every enterprise by default have some enterprise systems which are running their enterprise for over the years, right? In the form of ERP, CRM, accounting software, and different. And that's traditional AI or generative AI, if something has to be plugged into that particular ecosystem without breaking or causing any damage to the day-to-day business, I think it's going to be unforgivable, right? That's something that the biggest challenge everybody in the enterprise space have. Some of them have deep pockets, but it doesn't mean they have a solution, right? I think biggest is the technical debt, as they call it, right? Because the more the legacy the system is, or more aged it is, the challenge of integrating and making it talk to the modern systems, even the model for that matter, is significantly complex. And that is one risk people are not willing to take as yet, right? So I think that is one. Another one is, obviously, we know, it's also a fact, that every response from GenAI or the response that you get is not necessarily correct. And hallucination is a common thing, and it is a very widely accepted one. And so when it comes to these spaces, people are very pragmatic. They don't really jump and embrace with joy. They're very selective about where they want to operate, right? And the third one which comes to me is, there's always this paradigm of, should I build this? Should I adopt something? Should I integrate with already existing stuff, right? I think the mindset is always this. The typical CTOs, CIOs, my peer network I speak to, always talk about, is it a case of being a maker, where you're trying to create something on your own, which will mean a lot of time, and more than that, significant amount of money. And then you don't really have a justification when will you really get the value out of it, right? And then is somebody just a, shaper. Adopt what is existing and try to train it towards your contextual data and data stores, and make some sense out of it, add some value out of it. But that also is not easy, because not every model, like you said, is as adaptive, as easy to connect with existing setup, right? Because all these hyperscalers typically, with all due respect, have built this with an intention of capturing the market, right? It's very normal, and that's been the case always. So when you try to put it into enterprise context, it is not seamless as much as we want to believe it is. I'm sure Anand will also agree when he's using some of these, and likewise he's one of the biggest OEM players, so I know it for a fact. As an end user, I know the challenges when we really have to adopt something and have a use case built. Because these considerations is what is causing a little bit of, I won't say hesitance, there's no hesitance, but like it's not moving as fast as one would like. And people are taking very selective approaches, targeting one or two departments or say functions to begin with, and see how the results are. And on those are probably non-critical ones to begin with, to see the value. And that's where I think the marketing, sales, content generation, HR to some extent, right, which doesn't really impact your business on a day-to-day basis from a revenue and stuff. I think the stakes are very high, and the funda of the cost, the compute power that's required. If somebody is even thinking, okay, I'll have my own so that I don't have concerns about security, data privacy, and all those regulations. Well, do you have the deep pockets and do this? I think because people are definitely looking for some breadth, because the costs are significantly huge, and still not able to determine what is that you get out of it. Will it really add to your top line? Is it going to augment your bottom line? I think those, the cost benefit analysis is not coming out as crystal clear. It is not to say it is discouraging, but I think it is still evolving. people are iterating over these things. Yeah, it's not a embrace everything and go big. Yeah, that's where we are.
No, this is really great. And now one follow-up question that I have, that how can we address the skill gap, right? Like especially when we are implementing any solutions. I mean, I'm sure that very soon we'll start seeing resumes with 10 years of experience on Gen AI, and I mean we'll start. But how could we actually do that, and what perhaps the platform that you're creating could help address that? Anand, if you could share.
Right. So I presume the question is on skills organizations need to build generative AI solutions, right? So I actually think it, to an extent, lowers the skill barrier in a way, because a lot of the work that data scientists used to do earlier has in a way been offloaded. Like Amol said, now everything is available, pre-trained, it's been done by large companies, it's commoditized. And hence what the data scientists can focus on, or the business analysts in fact can focus on, is how do we use this. In fact, in our company, the person who actually spends the most time on trying out the output of generative AI models is a linguist. She's a PhD in linguistics. In fact, she's the one who is also driving our initiatives on generative AI governance and all that, right? Because she can, it's now open to be played by even by a non-technical person, right? Anyone can go in, can generate the prompt. You don't need to do the prompt engineering to start off with. Once you've decided, then you can get your engineers to do the prompt engineering. But before you even do that, so what used to be the explorative analysis earlier in data science, where data scientists used to search for insights in data, used to mine data, used to find patterns, and then come up with models, then establish that, okay, this model is able to do something like a prediction and classification, etc. Now, a lot of that time has been cut short, especially in the language and image generation space. It may not have been cut in where you have core data like banking data or financial transactions, etc. There, if I have to do a revenue projection for the next 3 quarters, I'll still need my traditional AI techniques. I cannot use generative AI yet, because again, the data is completely the enterprises. But for a lot of use cases which involve unstructured data and content, that time has actually been cut down. The technical barrier has been cut down. I can get my developers in, like I said, after I've actually played around with different models. Most of these models today come with a playground, so I can actually look at for what input, what is the quality of the output, including things like language, tone, accuracy, how much of hallucination is there. If I give specific facts, how much do I need to control other parameters so that the Gen AI model sticks to the facts, right? And there are parameters that most of these models come with, like temperature or various other parameters. So even a business analyst can actually do that work, which earlier was not possible. Unless you actually had even basic data analysis skills, SQL query skills, etc., it was difficult to play with the data. So I would actually say it's democratizing it more and more.
No, this is a great answer. And Amol, as you mentioned, we are planning to come up with the use case, right? Like one of the use cases is generating code. So perhaps that will also speed up the process of getting technical abilities, and people can comfortably say that they have with pre-trained 10 years of experience. You can comfortably say that, like, you can leverage, right, like the existing framework. So great. So follow-up question is, and you slightly touched on that question, but touched that part, but ethical considerations, right? Like, what are the ethical considerations? If you could share some light, some Amol, that will be very helpful.
Sure. I think before going to ethical, let's try to understand what are the challenges from traditional AI to foundational AI when we are moving. So there are 4 or 5 big challenges that we are seeing. One is bias. So I am having a model that I am using which can be trained on a specific data, and like let's assume that it is not trained on a diverse data, then I can have a bias. Second is hallucination, that everyone is like maybe Anand, Ravi is talking about. So example of hallucination, there are 3-4 examples that I would like to give. One is like maybe I am training or I am using a data of the some data sets where I am telling the model that Earth is flat, and I am asking that question to the model, so it will come up with that particular analogy saying that okay, I ask him how is Earth, it will say Earth is flat. So that is hallucination. Third is opacity. So let's say that I am asking the model to write a poem on love. It will say love is blind, love is great, love is that, love is this, but is there some meaning out of it? So the model is able to derive a complex meaning out of it, but that we are not able to derive. So that's the third problem. Again, it is based on data again. So how adverse the data is, or how bad the data that particular model has been trained on. It might be like maybe trained on this kind of a data set, and that is why it is coming up with that particular stuff. Fourth is security. That's a very important challenge that everyone is going to see. So again, not sure if you have seen 2 or 3 examples. So one is with Samsung. So ChatGPT leaked their IP data, which was supposed to be used for a new feature in their phone, and like this is a big problem that we are seeing. Some researcher, they were trying to hypnotize ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 and Bard, and they were able to do that. So what they try to do is they were trying to tell the model that you have to put money in the bank in order to get your tax returns filed. This was a use case from an IRS perspective, and the model, when it was answering, it was saying that yes, you have to put deposit in the bank first in order to even file your returns. Second example is like the model was trained saying that okay, you don't need to follow a red light. That is like a game, but you don't need to follow. You just need to like maybe crash the red light all the time. And the model was giving those kind of an answer. So this is a combination of like maybe a security, hallucination and opacity. Now how do we address this? So there are 5 or 6 again areas that we may have to remember. And again, this is like maybe we are in the first hour of the 24-hour cycle of Gen AI. So from an ethical AI perspective, the most important is bias. How I ensure that whatever my model is, it is not trained on the biased data. Now how do I ensure it? I may use, for example, diverse data set. Like maybe it's not like maybe a racist data set, it may not be like maybe a very feminist data set. All those things can be done. The second is explainability, and that's a very important thing and very complex thing at the same point of time. We were able to achieve it in the traditional AI. How I can explain that what the model is giving me an output, it has to explain why it is giving me that particular output. So that's the second thing. Again, in the LLM space, there are different ways from an explanatory perspective, and everyone is at this point of time researching on that. The third is transparency. How I can ensure my data is transparent. My data is free of HAP, which is hate, abuse and profanity. So how I can ensure that. Another thing is security and robustness. So how my model is very secure, which cannot be hacked. At the same point of time, it is robust in nature, where attack on it. So like let's say if a prompt engineer is trying to put a prompt, okay, and try to train a model. Now as an hacker, if I am able to hack into that and then probably train the model with a specific different prompt, it may start like maybe behaving completely differently. So these are some of the challenges at this point of time, and from an ethical AI perspective, we have to remember that these 5 or 6 areas need to be thought about when we are building the solution. I'm not saying we have answers for all of these today from an LLM perspective, from a foundational model perspective. We got answers to it from a traditional perspective to some extent, not to 100% extent. But now it's the difficult way, because LLM or foundational model, each foundational model, like for example encoder, for example decoder, encoder, decoder, they are going to have multiple set of metrics from a ethical perspective. So in the case of summarization, it is called as rope. There are 64 metrics that we have to consider. As of today, there are 64 metrics that I know of, which has to be considered in order to address the ethical AI perspective. And there are like maybe how we can put governance in place as well. So that we may have to start looking at or figuring out.
No, this is very interesting, and I've seen some videos also where it can use your voice, create like videos also. So with that context, right, like how regulation would play a role, and perhaps maybe I think Anand, if you could also cover that part, right, like that will be very helpful. Sure.
So there is some regulation already, especially in the US and EU, which requires all AI, especially where there are decisions being taken, for the AI to be open to audit, to be explainable, like Amol said. And then of course there are all the other parameters, like it has to be free of any kind of toxicity, it has to be what one would call part of responsible AI. Right? Because in the example I gave earlier, if as an organization I'm creating personalized communications to say 10 candidates, 5 of them I used AI to do it, 5 of them used a slightly different tone which is more engaging, 5 I used a tone which is less engaging, which is more formal, right? And the AI did it. And hence there was a higher chance that these 5 applied, the other 5 didn't apply. The responsibility still lies with the organization, right? So, and this was a very mild case, which it was just the tone. You could have obviously more impactful things. You could have incorrect information, misinformation, hallucination also, and so on. Or let's take decision making. If I rated candidates based on certain skills, and my algorithm is opaque, not open to audit, again I could face legal, someone could sue me saying, oh, your algorithm preferred a certain candidate because maybe your algorithm was racist or elitist. You gave preference to someone who came from Harvard only because of the brand, and you're being elitist. And in the US, you can actually sue someone for being elitist as well, right? Not only racist. Essentially, any kind of biases. So when we do the matching, for example, we make sure all the criteria that are used for matching are anonymized. We ensure whether it is gender, race, bias, etc. If the user wants it to be flagged in a certain way, we do that, but it is still anonymized, and we don't call out whether this person is XY gender or race, etc. The user we leave it to the user, for example, to decide if they do want to see diversity candidates, because that is a genuine requirement companies have, right? That, okay, I want to do more diversity hiring, but how do I ensure that I'm doing a fair ranking? At the same time, I'm flagging which candidates are part of, say, a diversity hiring based on your criteria, not my platform's criteria. Those things become key aspects from a governance perspective, right? And that is how we try to ensure that whatever decisions or recommendations or ranking scores that our platform generates are open to audit. We also work with governance experts. AI governance platforms are coming up, they're still evolving, which look at all of these different criteria, let you measure it, let you monitor it. And like I said, today there are no standards But I see this evolving maybe in the next 5 years. We will also, like you have security standards, right? You have to be SOC 2 or whatever. Again, the standards are yet to evolve, but at least what it means that someone can publish a report that says this is how I'm measuring on each of these aspects, and I'm open to audit. Basically any auditor can come and validate, right? So that is where we see that evolving.
Great. So, I mean, when I see, right, like, I mean, there's AI and, I mean, standards, and what I have seen that there are like a lot of things that we need to consider, and testing, right, that has to be done. How do you generally do the testing part of it? And again, did you mention, like you mentioned 64 parameters, is this related to that, or these are metrics?
These are metrics. These are metrics.
That are different, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think to what Anand mentioned, there is a compliance. So I think Government of India has passed some compliance on data.
Okay.
Now there is no as such compliance on the LLM model that is there today. But as Anand was saying, like maybe there might be a security compliance. Like security compliance, there might be an LLM compliance. Definitely need to come into picture, because one good example for that is, like, let's say if someone is trying to put an IP, okay, and if he uses that particular information in some of the, for example, chat GPT or somewhere, and the model gets that particular information, now it would be able to generate a patent out of that as well, or an IP out of that as well, if someone is asking a very specific prompt question to it.
Right.
And like, let's say Anand has that particular IP, but I am going to use that because the way I have asked that particular model the question, it has given me that information, and I am going to use that particular information in order to file an IP on my name.
Right.
So how do we ensure IP and the infringement or the trademark is going to be a major concern that I see coming in this particular area, and there are going to be definitely good amount of regulation that needs to happen.
Right.
Because when we talk about, I think Ravi was talking about creativity, Anand was talking about creativity, but like, let's say if someone, they are creating something on their own, how can they establish a trademark now? Because ChatGPT or tools like this, like Dele, can generate, Firefly can generate like maybe an image, and how can I associate some kind of an IP with that particular image? So that is a big concern to everyone, and what I am seeing is big organization, as I think Ravi was also mentioning, big organization, they are asking for on-prem deployment of the LLM models, which is very expensive.
Right.
So, but they are very skeptical about putting their data outside. For example, the case with Samsung that happened, and there are a couple of cases where their data was used and it was abused in order to create an IP by someone else.
Right. Right.
So to Anand's point, I think regulation will come into picture, compliance will come into picture, and they may consider all the 64 parameters that I am talking about, or there would be more parameters.
Right.
This is parameters I know from an IBM standpoint that we are trying to put together.
Right.
And again, like we are doing, there is a research team that is working on this, but this is what IBM thinks. So there might be a body that would be formed in order to, at some point of time, where all the biggies will come together and they will say, okay, these are the regulation and compliance that needs to come into picture when somebody is trying to use
Right.
an LLM model that is available in open source.
Got it, got it. Now, so just one quick, very simple question. If you are using ChatGPT and if you are asking questions and if you are getting some information, who owns, right, like that at this moment? I mean, I know, right, like we are not representing any OpenAI, or, but is there a concern for us, right, like when we are using it? Should there be any concern?
Definitely, I think we should not put data which is like maybe an IP data, and if we are asking that particular question, and if that data can be leveraged by ChatGPT in order to...
No, if ChatGPT leverages, that's a different thing. But if we leverage, and if we decide, right, like if we create, right, like for example, I'll just give you an example. Website, right, like I mean, in website, like we use a lot of prompts to create, right, like to generate the text, right, like for the website. perhaps some graphics also. If we use ChatGPT and create, right, like blogs and I mean, who owns that?
Okay,
If I put a prompt and if I get the answer, I mean, will I own or will, you know, ChatGPT or, you know, their, since they answered or any such platform?
I think that's a great question and a complex question. So like, let me try to put an analogy and if Anand and Ravi has an answer. So autonomous car, okay, I own an autonomous car, okay, and it hits someone. Who is going to be blamed for it? Is it me? Is it the company? Is it the police?
Right.
So
Right.
I think it's like that. The information would be used by ChatGPT in order to like maybe create the content, but who owns it? Is it like maybe, I believe, again I may be wrong, but it would be the one who is trying to get the information out of that particular tool.
Right.
And you have anything to add?
Ideally, I believe that, but you know, I mean, is there any concern that we should have on that?
Yes, so attribution is going to be a challenge, and today what we do is we make it more like an assistive technology. So anything that is created goes through at least some human review. So there is a human in the loop today. It can be completely automated, but again, that decision is left to the human. So the attribution or the ownership of any content created, like I said, you know, you might have something on the website which to some people might be offensive, or the other way around. Who takes the blame? Who takes the credit, right? And that is your question. And I think, at least for content, the way we see it, it is still with the organization, and we give those tools to the organization to decide whether to finally publish it or not. With a car, of course, you may not be able to do that because, you know, you don't have those, you may not have those checkpoints, but
Right.
yeah.
No, this is good.
I think I have the same thing because, like you said, that is probably one of the biggest constraints or dampeners for enterprises to open up their data sets or their data sources to this
Right.
platform, because there is definitely a chance of infringement of IP, no doubt about it.
Right.
And it's small or big doesn't matter, right? And it all depends on the nature of business you are in.
Right.
And very pointed question that you asked about whose attribution it would be. I think the platform doesn't know about it as much as the consumer, right? I think it's a gray area. So right now there's nothing defined per se, right? I think right now people may get away, they are getting away, but I think in future probably with all the guidelines and regulations that Anand mentioned about, it will be caught soon, and there will be instances where people will be pulled up for this particular infringements also. Because until that happens, I think nobody will feel secure in trying to adopt something as big as this. So I would rather say, right now the industry is going through not an exciting phase, but an excruciating phase when it comes to adoption, right? And every adoption goes through this phase, right?
Yeah,
And this is much more revolutionary because it actually is touching the core of your assets, digital assets,
Right.
which I think people have put together, securing it, keeping it close to their heart.
Right.
And it can be probably, there are businesses built with
Right.
no brick and mortar, completely on digital assets. Imagine infringements of that nature happen, it can be futile. I mean, it can be like, it have fatal ramifications. So,
Right.
and I think this is still a gray area, and that is one of the major roadblocks in people opening up and embracing it widely.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But I believe, right, like in the future, the way it happened, right, like with Google Maps, and I will give you a very interesting, example, and this happened, right, like I went to one session where lawyers and technology entrepreneurs were talking about AI, and everyone was saying data privacy, and they were talking about like everything, and most of them, right, like audience were lawyers or like pursuing law. And I asked them, right, like how many of you, came to this event by using, for example, Google Maps. Half of them raised their hand. So look, I mean, the point is that if you want to get maximum out of it, I mean, you cannot just, right, like keep on, talking negative continuously about AI. I mean, it is definitely enhancing our lives. So of course that parameter has to, but it also depends on the adoption.
Yeah.
I mean, if more people adopt, I think, the attribution and the other part would be very easy. So this is great. I mean, what we will do, right? Like we have been asking and we are running out of the time. I think, I'm thoroughly enjoying the session and I'm sure everyone, but many people have questions. So what we'll do, I mean, there are still 3 parts that are left. We'll get like few questions and then we'll cover, right, like rest of the parts. So anyone would like to ask questions?
So we discussed that most of the industries, especially the finance industry, seems to be at the bottom of the stack. We are struggling to get the big banks just move to the cloud. They're saying we will move to the cloud, but we'll move to private cloud. So where will they stand? I mean, having the penetration or acceptance of this into the products of the banking world or finance world really. What do you think is going to be done?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So as I was saying, like maybe on-prem. So I'm currently working on 2 big on-prem deployment. One of is a bank, and the bank definitely are going to have on-prem deployment of LLM. They are not going to use the SaaS version. So all the biggies, the companies who do banking, telco, who do research, who has like maybe a revenue more than 100 million, they are definitely going to go with on-prem version of LLM at least for next 5 years. After that, don't know.
But they will definitely have some use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. We are working on a couple of use cases for banking, for finance and taxation as well.
I think if you could share, right, like some of those, I mean, I know you cannot share, but I mean, if there are any opportunity, then whatever you can share, I think that will be very good because I'm sure, right, like a lot of domain, and again, what we did not cover, right, like, I mean, for manufacturers or, if someone, so for example, there are like a few startups who are actually doing something in EV, how they can connect to this generative AI or these capabilities to enhance their offerings? I mean, are there any?
Yeah, so I have personally built 3 use cases for manufacturing industry with Gen AI, and there was an event called as Watson X Day in US. So I presented over there. So again, like there are use cases in manufacturing definitely for sure.
Right.
Again, like it again boils down to customer care somehow or related supply chain, inventory management, all those stuff. But as I am saying, like maybe the top use cases that industry is trying to target: IT processes, HR, talent. So again, those use cases, customer care, those use cases are the prevalent one. These use cases are coming up, but people are skeptical about even calling out those use cases.
Right.
They are like maybe still there is a hesitancy around those use cases to be discussed openly with OEMs like us.
Right. No, so this actually, right, like, I mean, let's have next session talking about the use cases where perhaps startups can come, we can have the brainstorming session. I mean, if you're interested, maybe, right, like we can have that session where you can connect with your startup and try to find out ideas, right, like that we can use. So we can have that, right, like in the next session, but there are a few questions, yes.
In the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years, at a strategy formulation level, right, at a business level, because right now we're looking at individual use cases. But do you look at Gen AI playing an important role at a overall business level, because there's a certain amount of imagination and vision attached to the strategy formulation part as such, right? So will it, in a way, pan out when it becomes a very important part of?
I can talk about some stats that I know. So, yeah, he will hate me. Probably I'm taking the name of Gartner. Okay, I'll not take that name. But based on the analysis, the CXOs, like this guy, what they are saying is this by first half of 2024, things are going to get stabilized from a Gen AI standpoint. And between next 3 to 5 years, you will see more use cases, and by next 1 and 1.5 decade, you will see around 70% Gen AI being used along with traditional AI. And this is like, these are the numbers that are there on the net as well. But there is a hype cycle at this point of time. So we are, I think, at the peak of the hype cycle. It will get stabilized. Definitely it's going to take between 3 to 5 years to stabilize the hype cycle. But there is a huge opportunity. So I was hearing someone, he said that in his 20 years of career. He was like maybe a consultant at one of the McKinsey's of the world. He was saying that he has not seen so much destructive and disruptive hype cycle for any technology that has happened in last 6 months. See, if you see Gen AI, it started in 2021. So the name was coined as Gen AI or LLM by Stanford scientists in 2021. So we are just 2 years down that. And you see the hype that it has created. Every CXO is talking about it. So from a stats perspective, 70% companies are in the exploration phase, 5 to 7% are in POC stage today, and this is going to continue till this year. Around 15% they are in like maybe identification of use cases from an enterprise. Again, I am talking about big enterprises. But it is going to be the strategy of organization to have this along with the traditional AI. And what is happening is people are trying to correlate with metaverse. There was a very big hype of metaverse as well. The challenge with metaverse, there were 2 or 3-fold challenge. One was it was needing lot of devices. So metaverse on its own was just a concept. In order to address the metaverse, I need like maybe huge number of devices. So who is going to pay for that? So that was a challenge. In this case, the devices are there, the LLM models are there. Now, how you can bring your use cases, how you can build on top of that, that's going to be an important.
I think just to add to this point, I mean, I agree with you, right? Like, I mean, we went through this big data, cryptocurrency, blockchain, but we never like was able to be part of that, right? Either the same, I mean, we got this chat GPT prompt, right? Like where you can prompt and you can see the results. So it was so easy for us to interact. And just to let you know, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Palo Alto, right next to Stanford University, and there was like this Mexican restaurant. And I was, right, like I mean, I'll tell you, 4 or 5 tables, right? Like everyone was talking about Gen AI. So, I think, the interest and, the tangibly I can see, right, like the results, which didn't happen in other technologies. So that could also is extending the perhaps hype.
That was my another. I mean, so far he's saying 6 months. I possibly will say about a year. We talk so much about cryptocurrencies. We talk so much about blockchain. But the buzz that it has created, I didn't see it.
Yeah. So with cryptocurrency also, my challenge was, you like downloading that wallet and like ensuring that keeping it. I mean, it was not very easy, right? Like to interact with it, but with at least
is this to stay, or there will be something else which will sweep out everything?
I think I have.
Continue your job.
Yeah.
Just one point, I think, in terms of why we think it is very disruptive, because we all of us are actually experiencing it.
Absolutely. We are being part of it.
No, but if you look at AI has been in works since long time, right? Amazon has been using AI for your relevant search or something showing your similar products. That's an AI in the background, but it was running in the background. But all of us are millions of people are experiencing it. That's the difference.
I think that's what I'm going to say, because this is more human-like, conversational, where you're able to relate. It's more relatable to a end user, every common man, and that's why I think this impact is much profound than the classical, all the classical technical jargon we've gone through, all the hype cycles, right? Because
Actually, it's an interface which has been developed.
yes.
Right.
Interface is what we
Yeah.
actually the interface.
Yeah.
So there is a Google's, I think I was watching a YouTube from the Google's AI chief architect. I think that's what the designation is. That's what she said. This is as you said, right, it's more like an interface innovation, or it's a design innovation, right? That's the reason we are doing it.
So I think if you know, I think we're already in the co-pilot phases. Everybody has a co-pilot now, and technically, because even a developer can have a co-pilot, GitHub has their own co-pilot, which augments and helps the developer to create code, right? Code generation and stuff. I think everybody has a virtual or an option to have a virtual assistant. So like Amol said, there are few functions, if not industries, in every industry, which certainly will benefit out of it, would like to benefit out of it. Customer care, definitely, because self-service models are the name of the game. People want it fast and at the fingertips, and as interactive and as conversation it can be, people can love to do it. We don't want to talk to an agent anymore. right? I think that's why I think it's much more pervasive than other hype cycles we've seen.
If I can just add a point on the human interfaces, I think a lot of ISVs, existing products, will also reinvent their interfaces. So where today you have to fill a form and go through and do a lot of data entry, I think more and more the experience will change to become more human friendly. There's of course all the voice based input, etc., but also in terms of the AI giving you more prompts, not just through chatbots, but every single interface that we see, like I said, where you have a more form based interface, I think will become more human interfaces. So that is where, I think there will be existing ISVs will need to reinvent themselves, and there will be space for a lot of new startups as well to reimagine how things are done, right? Even the workflows. Can you reimagine, just take away, cut out certain steps in the process which were being done by a human, but now instead can be done by the AI? It will not replace it in my view, but it will enrich existing interfaces, complement it, to rethink how work is done essentially.
No, this is a great point, and I think we all need to connect these things, right? Like with our ideas, with our specific domain-specific areas. I know that like it's already 12. I mean, we had 1 hour networking session, but this session was getting so much interested. I mean, what we will do is that we still will have networking session, but just right, like I'm sure, right, like there are a lot of questions that everyone has. I mean, we'll just take a pause right now. Maybe you can ask, right, like in the networking session. I would like to end with one last question, because I'm sure like a lot of entrepreneurs, someone with ideas are here. Could you share your insights? I mean, you go to so many seminars, you talk to so many people. What is the investment landscape? Investment situation, right? Like in this generative AI world. I mean, if you could share, right, like how, like who would be able to answer that from an investment perspective? So in general, right? Yeah, I mean, what is basically happening right now? I mean, are you seeing, right, like earlier everyone used to use AI to just, right, like get good valuation.
Correct. Now I think now
we use, right, like Gen AI, and if we use Gen AI, like what is the upside potential that we could see, right? Like even with the simple AI.
So I think I was reading. I was reading somewhere on LinkedIn itself. There was a company, I think 4 weeks old company. It got like maybe start putting LLM and Gen AI. The product was very good, and it got a funding, I think, of 2 or 3 million in couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So definitely there is a potential, but what I feel is like what investors are looking for is what is the operational when the company is going to get operational, what is the ROI? So they are still sticking to the basics, because I think what the tide that they have seen in past years, where there was a huge tide around, like maybe huge investment, but they were not able to make money. So like everyone was extrapolating their valuation and trying to get more investment. So what I feel is I am talking to a couple of investors, couple of entrepreneurs, and everyone is saying that everyone is playing like maybe a wait and watch. So adding Gen AI, will it add a value? I am skeptical, to be honest. Like if you are operational, if you are customer, if you are paid customer, if you are doing paid POCs, definitely you will get funding. Whether you are adding Gen AI or not, you will get definitely funding. That's what my reading is. And probably Anand may add something.
Yeah.
He's the one who is trying to get.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. I think finally it comes down to the value that is being delivered on top of Gen AI, especially in the current environment. Maybe in the kind of world economy 2 years back, if you had a Gen AI idea, people would have been ready to throw money at it. In the current environment, of course, people want to see the business value, the profitability, all of that. With everything, right? And Gen AI is no exception. So that's our experience so far as well. You have revenue, you have profits, great. You have Gen AI or don't. Of course, it plays a part, and investors Sequoia, for example, we know has been, partners have a mandate to invest in Gen AI companies, but Sequoia has also burned their fingers with cryptocurrency and all that. They've lost money there. So they're being very cautious now with the Gen AI wave and so on.
Right, right, right. No, great, great. Thank you. Okay.
I think want to add something.
Yes, yes, go ahead.
So we also have some investors backing us and we regularly speak with them. Some insights, we just coming out, 3 insights. One is they clearly mentioned that wherever they had invested in the past 3 years, and those were manual workflows with some automation and some traditional AI, suddenly those companies have got disrupted with Gen AI. That's first analysis. Point number 2 is
Just
yes.
where they are operational, where they like maybe making profits. Those companies that you are talking about.
No, they're not making profit. I will come to that point in the last because that's a very interesting. But most of these are in the segments of sales, HR, tech, sales tech, CRM, supply chain. But they're trying to solve some manual process with automation or traditional AI. And all those businesses got disrupted, so investment got lost.
And what was the size of that investment, if we could just...
Typically, it was somewhere around 400K to 5 million. So I'm talking about deep tech, VC fund, in that space. Second learning which came out was today, before the Gen AI moment, whatever investment which is used to receive, out of 10, couple of them were on traditional AI. Traditional AI enabled started come on. Today, it's 80% of the pitches have just turned around into Gen AI.
Okay.
And that's the real fact. So investors have become more cautious now. They want to look at every real idea. Third idea is most of these investors, initial speakers, investors, Series A, Series A investors, they are trying to wait till 24. 1 year down the line, they want to test the waters. They don't want to invest. Everyone is analyzing the market.
That's what we are.
That's the right part.
Right.
Fourth angle is all these Gen AI ideas actually are not for revenue generation or profit. It's for valuation. They will be investing and selling it off. That's the concept.
Just
Yeah, go ahead.
this last one. So I work for a company which is in data governance. So we also, you are my colleague. And one interesting thing has happened. So we are very good in data governance. There are in the industry for a long time. Just we startup. We were Series B year 2 years now. And everything is going good. And recently we came in governance model for LLM. And it's still under development. It will come out in next quarter or something like that. What do you think from the perspective?
So is it a data governance or model governance?
So it will be model governance. We are doing data governance for all the data
So
sources.
I would say you should focus on like what market you are targeting at this point of time. Which is the market that you are targeting?
Enterprise.
No, but like is it like APAC, is it ASEAN, is it which?
US.
US, okay. Okay, then probably you may have to move to data governance for sure. India market is
so
going to...
we are not in India yet.
Okay. No, but it is going to have a lot of data governance activity because of the bill. You will see huge traction with all the banks because it's a mandate.
Right.
And if you look at US market, yes, then probably model governance is going to play a pivotal.
Okay. So basically the plan is like to go as a funding with this solution and just say that okay we are different.
So is it a traditional model governance or
Gen.
Gen? Then probably you may have to consider all those parameters. And that is a big challenge. The challenge with that at this point of time, so I was talking to a researcher from IBM who is working on this from the governance of LLM matrix perspective. It is very difficult to establish ground truth when you are trying to compare the matrix, because the ground truth itself is based on some data which is biased. So that is, I am just talking about one parameter, one matrix rho. So that parameter itself, like they have been like working 3 or 4 IBM researchers are working on this to just work on one matrix.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you so much let's give like a big round of applause and give it continue amazing session. I have been learning and I have been following these things, but I never got such a great information in just 2.5 hours. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. Let's continue, right? Please be active, right? Like on the group, and as I mentioned, share your insights, like how you felt, how perhaps you can take few photos also, post it on LinkedIn. And the beauty of networking, right? Like the beauty of networking is when you are open, right? Like when you are open, others will also start opening up. And let's basically, right? Have that attitude, and let's ensure that we are getting maximum out of learnings as well as networking. Okay, so let's with that, let's have now networking session as well. And yes, one more thing. Please pin down your thoughts. What did you like? What do you want actually from these such sessions? We are trying to have at least one session per month, covering different topics. The previous session was with Rachana Ranade, CA Rachana Ranade. It was also very well received. We will also have follow-up sessions on this, and we have already got 2-3 topics ideas which I will talk to you and we'll have. But please, leverage it, use it, and if you need any help, for investments or any connections, enterprise connections, very happy to, share whatever we have, and let's work, as a community and help each other. Okay, all right, with that note, let's have, once again, thanks so much for being here. And let's continue our conversation. This is just the beginning.